The Wellness Show, episode 185.
Welcome to The Wellness Show, a podcast on health and wealth. I'm your host, Tyhson Banighen, the founder of the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy. Join me as we get the latest insight, tips, and strategies from wellness providers, coaches, and successful, heart-centered entrepreneurs, and much, much more.
Welcome to the Wellness Show, and today we have the return guest, Nenari, the Princess of the Sea. We're going to talk about one's soul path. We're going to talk about astrology. We're going to get caught up to date. But before we begin, she has these Mickey Mouse ears on, which I think are pretty amazing. And when I started to think about it, she really reminds me of Princess Leia from Star Wars. So, one princess to another princess, welcome to the show. So what's up in your universe?
Thank you. Oh my gosh, much. This is the year of the unicorn, and ironically, that is the official mascot, if you will, of Scotland. So, Soul Astrology is where I'm at and what's going on and what I want to share today. So, do you want to just dive right into it?
Yeah, well, what happened to the year of the dog?
The year of the what?
Of the dog in the Chinese calendar. How did the unicorn get?
Well, okay. Well, see, the thing is that, and this is the core essence of who we are, is when we tune into the soul has with it a completely different spectrum of animals and animal totems. Chinese astrology is wonderful, and there's other senses of astrologies that are out there. What is really key actually is more about having to do with soul, and that's what this year has to do with, really. This year is a 2-year in numerology, and so 2018 equates to the year of a 2, or 11, which is the ascended master number, and 2 is about union. 2 being as one, bringing the divine feminine and the divine masculine together within you, Y-O-U, union. Yeah, and so along with that comes the soul essence. And when you're tuning into source energy and you're tuning into soul energy, you have soul totems, if you will, or soul astrology. And so things like dragons, things like fairies, pixies, but things that we think are imaginary creatures actually are not, because in multidimensional consciousness, they are real. And just as real as you and I sitting here right now. So in that realm, this year is the year of the unicorn. So it's you as in Y-O-U, and it's about soul ascended mastery and coming into that union of tuning into source energy and following your heart. And it's about following your heart in alignment with source's heart. And because there's a big difference between the intuitive heart and the emotional heart. Your heart is in your physical heart of what the emotions want, right? And being triggered by that, or going within and listening to the vision. So the 4 questions to ask this year in the year of the unicorn is, what is source's vision for my life? What and who can I be to have that come into being? And what am I to let go of? And when and where and what action, in right action, am I to take in this moment as being guided by source? So that's really what soul astrology is about, is in being in tune with that.
It's interesting because if you do ordinary astrology and you do different types of readings, it comes up with the same thing, at least for me, in regard to this being a master number 11, a 2-year. And in my own personal cycle, the very thing that you're talking about is so front and center in my life, it's overwhelmingly amazing. And sometimes just overwhelming and not so amazing. But, it's interesting that the polarity between, for example, the ability to deliver one's message to the world and the incapacity of the technology on the planet to carry the energy of what we want to transmit. So, we just had an example of the technology can't handle the communication we want to have, so it all screws up, or the computer goes sideways or whatever. So it's an interesting challenge, where is the world that we're living in, and the 3D hasn't caught up to the message that we're trying to create. It just can't carry this new vibrational frequency. Anyway, that's what's happening in my world. So back to the master number 11, can you say a bit about that? I mean, that's a pretty powerful number.
The ascended mastery number of the number 11 is about stepping into who you are as your ascended master of that soul essence, yeah? And one of the reasons that the technology can't handle it is because we're multidimensional beings. You know, it's often said that we are spiritual beings having this human experience. It's actually full circle. And this is what the ascended master 11 number means, or the 2 number being, you know, in union, when you take 11 and reduce it even further. It's about being in that soul essence. And what it has to do with is exactly what Tesla said. What did Tesla say? If you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of vibration, frequency, and energy, yeah? And so it's really interesting when you're looking at it from a soul perspective, because we're multidimensional consciousness, our technology cannot handle it because it's still 3D. And we're not just 5D, we're not just 6D, we're not just whatever it is science has come up with now, I think 11 or 12 dimensions. We're actually multidimensional beings. So we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and within having that human experience, we remember, embrace, and soulfully treasure or rest within being that spiritual being that we are. And so from the soul astrology perspective, and this is where the difference between earthly astrology is and soul astrology is. Earthly astrology is based upon the moon cycle and it being on the solar calendar. The solar calendar basically has us link in to our phase of the moon, or our lunar cycle, as a 29 to 30 day. And I jokingly say, so what is the moon in? Menopause? I know I'm in menopause, but you know, what is the moon doing? Is she in menopause? Because really, if you look at it, instead of looking at it from the earth perspective, if you were to look cosmically, soulfully, spiritually at the moon's lunar phase from new moon to new moon is actually 27.3 days, or roughly 28 days. So what is that? That's a woman's menstrual cycle. So the new moon is actually where we plant the seeds of consciousness that we're going to grow. And then as we go into the full moon phase is like a woman's ovulation. She's blossoming, she's glowing, she's that beauty and that essence of divine femininity. And so that's when we're meant to blossom and shine and celebrate. And then as we go back into the new moon phase again, there's actually 4 phases. If you've noticed, there is the sign of the triple goddess, right? Mm. And the triple goddess is, triple goddess is what? The quarter moon, the full moon, and then the 3/4 moon, or the quarter moon again, and going to the new moon. But people have forgotten there's actually 4 phases. The 4 main phases are new moon. Yeah, there you go, right? New moon. So technically right now, today, on the 12th of February, is actually the new moon. The reason that we say that the 15th would be the new moon is because we've got that 3 days, because we're looking at it from Earth instead of looking at it from the soul, from the cosmos. What have you got there? What's it say?
Here we have is the quarters and the moon, and the whole manifestation cycle according to what's happening from the moon's perspective. Interesting that you bring this up, because I teach this and help people understand this as a way of being totally embodied in their own being and understanding how to manifest. And we'll be launching the Letting Go Book Club. And on the mastermind level, we'll be actually using the moon cycles as part of our way of describing letting go of your emotions as they come up, but also of manifesting what it is that you want to show up in your life. So it's interesting that we're on the same page, I guess, in the book, so to speak.
That's fantastic. I love it. I know I've been teaching this for years, and you know, it just kind of dawned on me, because when I sat here, as you know, in the Okanagan Valley at Summerhill, back many years ago in 2012, I was one of the ones who helped set up and start up what we do at Summerhill Winery for the new moons and the full moons. And originally, when Susan Athena came forth with this original vision with Stephen Sipes, they're the ones who first created it. And then she asked me to come in and lead one of the circles. And it was like one of the very first ones. And one of the premises was that, you know, there wasn't any new moon. It was just going to be the full moon. And it was supposed to be just goddesses. And I said, well, why don't we have both goddesses and gods, both divine feminine and divine masculine for the full moon? And so that kind of shifted things. But we've been doing that since 2012 there. So I wanted to bring it here to Scotland. And so I started doing this, and I was setting up the new moon dates and the full moon dates. And I was like, hold on a minute. I'm not doing this by the lunar calendar. This is off. And I've been thinking about this, you know, and it goes in alignment with something that I'm actually creating. I'm creating a vibrational frequency generating device that has you tune into your soul song or your soul, you know, so that you're singing it and being that you activate the toroidal field that we are. And so it's in alignment with the true lunar phases of the true 28 days. And so even when we're looking at the moon, like right now, it's full. If you go look on your calendar, I'm sorry, it's the new moon today. And if you look at your calendar right now, it says it's got this wee little bit, right? And that's not completely accurate. So I've got to rejog my dates so that we have our gatherings here at the appropriate times in the lunar cycle. However, it's so very important because in this flat plane that we live here, of this toroidal field of energy that we're in, and the cosmos it's also us as well. And we really, as divine feminine, need to get back into our lunar cycle, even if we are in menopause, like myself, and, you know, and many others, you know, we still need to follow our lunar cycle. And it's very important that we get back into that.
Yeah, and if you're a male, the important thing is, you know, you may have the seed idea, you may have the intellect, or you may have the conception of the idea, but the fertilization or the implantation has to be according to the divine feminine, which is the moon cycle. So if you want to learn how to manifest, you know, with ease and grace rather than pushing the envelope, then the moon cycle is absolutely fundamentally essential in order to do the job correctly in harmony with sacred geometry and the toroidal field and all the rest of that. So that's really exciting. The more we align to the sacred geometry, the more our life is in balance. So back to the soul astrology point of view, I'm assuming that the moon cycle is part of that, but there's also more aspects to it other than the moon. Is that correct?
Aye, very much so, because it's the cosmic aspect that you're looking at. And so what's very important, and this is where earthly astrology varies, because if you notice when you go to get an astrology reading or you go read about your sign, I'm a Virgo, you know, my sun sign is Virgo and what have you, and most of the stuff, and I always wondered from the time I was a wee lass why astrology never resonated with me. And I came to really understand why, and it's because it's not based on soul. It's based on, again, looking at the moon from the earthly perspective and seeing the earthly phases of the moon from Earth, as opposed to looking at it from the cosmic or the soul perspective. So when you go for an astrology reading, and by no means am I, you know, dissing astrology, it's the foundation that it's being laid upon. Because when you go for an astrology reading and you're looking at it from the earthly perspective, they say, oh, your moon is in this, or this is going to happen on this day. They're not basing it on the lunar cycle, they're basing it on the solar cycle of the calendar. So it's very confusing, and it's not in alignment from the soul aspect. So when you're talking about the soul aspect, you're talking about what we call, from an earthly perspective, love, and all those attributes. Things like compassion, compassionate listening, cooperation, co-creation. This year, actually, being 2018, the 2-year, the Ascended Mastery number is about soul co-creation. Not only are we co-creating with what we call the Master Artist, Source, Spirit, God, whatever you want to call it, we're also meant to co-create with each other. And we're also meant to come in union in that sense. And you'll also see a lot of twin souls coming into union now in that respect and bringing forth their creations. So it's actually coming from the soul aspect in the intuitive heart. So soul astrology is all about tuning into source energy and listening to the calling from within of that still voice of source speaking to you, as opposed to, again, as I was saying earlier, your emotional heart that wants XYZ, you know, and you go and you create it and make something happen on the earth. You're actually listening to that still voice within. And so that's the biggest difference, you know, between the earthly astrology and the soul astrology. And what earthly astrology is meant to do is now catch up with the soul. The astrology readings now need to be based more from a cosmic perspective and from a soul perspective in looking at what's going on cosmically in looking at the moon, or looking at Nibiru, or looking at Mars or Venus or what have you. These planets, instead of looking at it from Earth, we're meant to be looking at it from the cosmos as source sees it.
Yeah, I would think that that's very difficult, but let's rewind because you said a lot of interesting things. So, just for some references, in the Mayan astrology, there's 2 dates that are important to them. Not only the day that you were born, but the day that you were conceived. So they use both, right? So I find that interesting. Also, in another reading that I just had, they separate out the divine mother from the divine father, or the two impulses, the yin and the yang. And for the divine mother, they go back 3 months prior to your birth. And so that's the yin, and then there's the yang. And then if we look at Chinese astrology, which is more closely based on the moon, if I understand that correctly, then I would assume in Chinese astrology we have more of a beginning of an alignment. So those are just different aspects of different cultures dealing with this, really with the reality of what it is to be in on the ship called planet Earth. What's it like to be embodied here? But you're saying, oh, that's all very well and good. We need a bigger perspective as our soul essence. What is it that we're here to do? And at that level, when we look at the cosmos, we have a totally different picture. The question then comes to my mind, what does that picture look like? Because you're not going to have the phases of the moon, for example. The phases of the moon are from our limited perspective, the little eye, looking up to our soul consciousness. But if we're looking from our soul into our incarnation, we're not going to see the moon phases at all. So how do we then adjust what we see, or how do we know that we see, or what the hell do we see, or what the heaven do we see uh, from the soul level perspective?
I love that. What the hell do we see, or what the heaven do we see? I'm glad you asked that, because soul astrology is not based upon, it takes into account all of those aspects that you were talking about, yes. But what you really want to look at is, for lack of a better word, the best earthly word I can give it is soul age. Now, from a soul perspective, we're infinite, okay? However, you often hear the term old soul. You often hear a term last lifer. You will often hear a term, oh, they're a young soul or a new soul, yeah? When you're looking at soul astrology, you're actually looking at the whole of the soul of all of the lives here on this earth, and all of the lives that you've had in multidimensional consciousness throughout parallel dimensions, parallel universes, parallel lives. Okay, and so how you access that is something that I teach, is how to access the soul through soul mediumship and through the Akashic records. When you're able to access the Akashic records, you're not accessing just Tyson in this life. You're accessing all of your lives that you've experienced here on this earth, and maybe you've had one in dimension, let's say 62, there's no name for it. Maybe you've had one in Andromeda, maybe you've had one in Rahu. You've had other lives in different dimensions, as well as different planets, different star systems. All of that's in accountability for soul astrology. So you're looking at it from a cosmic view instead of, oh, just what you're doing in this life. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting enough. Another way of looking at this, just from the incarnational point of view, or the DNA and RNA, and that evolutionary, just reading the book on from our Sasquatch brothers, and his name is Mamoon. He is the elder. He has full consciousness, embodied consciousness since humanity was created. And he says that our DNA and their DNA is 99% the same. So that means their ability to be interdimensional travelers, to not to be able to move between galaxies and all the rest of it is an inherent in our DNA. Never mind whether we were from Andromeda or we had another life. Just in our own DNA is the full memory of the Earth, right? And the Akashic record of the Earth is in our DNA. And that because of that connection, we have that ability to access any of that at any time whatsoever through our intelligence by asking. The question is, for most people, is they never ask. They never ask. They never go to that library. They never go to the
they never ask.
They're on the
yeah, they never ask, Tyson, but also they're not in the vibrational frequency. If you look at the masses on this planet, I mean, most of the people who are listening to this show will be in some form of vibrational frequency to be able to access certain things. But if you look at the masses on this planet, the masses on this planet have no bloody clue at all about any of this. So they're not in the right vibrational frequency to even be able to ask, let alone receive.
Yeah, I agree with you. They don't even know about the idea of asking. It isn't relevant.
Exactly.
So I get that.
Exactly.
But for those that do have the wherewithal, the fact is that you can ask. I mean, that's part of part of the function of your intellect is to ask the question. And as you were saying, from the soul essence, your guidance or your connection to source is where the answer comes from. The two make up a whole brain capacity to access this infinitude of information. So it's like guidance on demand. You ask and you receive. You knock and the door is open. So back to the soul essence astrology. So I'm assuming that the way that you were describing, the little I and the greater I, or the one that's connected to source energy or the soul essence, that when you get guidance from that level, then that gives you the different perspective of what this incarnation is all about and how to operate, because you're getting that from source consciousness or from that level of your being that's connected to the whole. And that's what you're teaching people, is how to plug into that and how to access that and how to trust that. Is that correct?
Exactly. And you just touched on a very key word right there: trust.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trust. Yeah, that's like the number one thing right now. My soul mediumship course is on right now, and I'm doing the online version, and then I'm also teaching it here personally. And that's the number one thing that is one of the key points to accessing the Akasha, is actually trusting what you're receiving. I mean, 9 times out of 10 people say to me, oh, isn't it just my imagination? It's like, no, your own soul's path and progression and being able to access your soul's essence is not just your imagination, and in fact, imagination is the seated soul, right? And so to be in that vibrational frequency, you have to trust what it is that you're receiving. Whether you're doing it as a reading for someone else or you're accessing your own. One of the first things that I teach in teaching people how to do this is to actually read for themselves. If they're not able to read for themselves, they have no business reading for somebody else. And now I know that's contrary and counterintuitive to a lot of people's teachings. People think, oh, well, you're too close to the source, and you can't access, you get in your own way, you can't access your own soul. It's like, if you can't access your own soul, there's something seriously wrong.
What have you got to show anybody else, right? I mean, how can you even
exactly
show them if you don't demonstrate it? Yeah, in this particular regard, you're really the real true teaching is really not so much the words that you're using or the lessons that you're giving, but the vibrational frequency of who you be, which is how much are you aligned to that soul essence of who you be, that actually teaches people, because they want to come into your auric field and they spontaneously get a bump up energetically by being in your field. And then they get curious, they want to know, well, who are you? Why are you here? Or why do I feel that I want to be around you? Or can you tell me what's going on? It's that curiosity that, that allows them to ask those sorts of questions. So that's very exciting. So in teaching this and having your own uh, ability to read your soul essence, then one of the things then is, what is this year all about? What do you think's coming down the pike? I mean, I have some sense of that, but what's your sense of it?
Magic, miracles, and upheaval.
Yeah,
And healing.
I would probably put it the other way around.
And well, the
Upheavals.
reason, yeah. Well, there's a reason, okay? For those who have yet to awaken into this consciousness, that's why I put that last.
Right.
I said the magic and the miracles first, because the majority of who are going to be watching this show are already there. Okay, they've already had their awakening. They've already gone through the muck, if you will, and to come into the lotus flower. So for them, this year is going to be all about miracles and magic, and the things that you've waited for so long to come into manifestation that is the vision from source are going to just start happening. Boom, 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 boom. Now, on the flip side of that, those who have not had their awakening yet, and those who are in the process of the muck, a lot of upheaval, right? And a lot of healing. And for them, it's going to be a lot about inner soul child healing, which is a lot different than inner child healing work. Inner child healing work has to do with, I'm focusing on my inner child in this life, and it has to do with me and whatnot. Inner soul child healing work has to do with, again, multidimensional consciousness and rewriting those mutated DNA programs into the RNA soul essence. And so for those people who haven't gone through that process yet, yeah, a lot of upheaval, a lot of chaos, a lot of shite, frankly, but then a lot of healing. And this is where the unicorn's magic comes in, because the unicorn's horn is not some fantasy thing. There is healing energy in the unicorn horn that can transform your consciousness if and when you choose it. And so for those people who are in that upheaval, it's turning to the magic of the unicorn horn. What does that mean? Source energy.
Yeah, if you look at the unicorn, you see the spiral, and if you're stuck, imagine the spiral of the unicorn, it will take you to the source. So whenever it feels icky, which is a technical term, then, think about the unicorn and that spiral and going back to source so that you can clear that feeling of, whatever that feeling of goo is or yuckiness, to get back into prime source. I think this is the time of revelation. This is the time where what will be revealed, where we'll actually truly know that the emperor has no clothes, including Mr. Tree-ump. Mr.
It's called realization. REALEYES, realize, instead of realize how we usually spell it in the English language, realization. Yeah, we're coming to a realization to see with real eyes. The emperor has no clothes, or the other analogy I use that source has given me is the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, absolutely.
What does Toto do? Yeah, Toto pulls the curtain, right? And you see that, Oz is not this big, powerful Oz anymore.
Right.
It's this little man,
Yeah, the matrix will start to be falling apart. You'll start to actually see holes in the matrix where we never saw them before, which will be interesting.
Well, what's interesting about that is that many people do not understand what a real matrix is. We have the matrix, as in what you're talking about, that fake matrix coming down. But a matrix really is a womb. It is a web in which sacred things are held. So we are going to dismantle the fake matrix and come into the real matrix, or the womb of creation, going back into again, you said Princess Leia, that I look like Princess Leia, going into the Princess Gaia, right? The
Yeah.
divine feminine essence, that sacred womb in which all creation is held, so that we can meet there with Source. And so that the divine masculine and the divine feminine within each of us can come into balance. And then also so the divine feminine and the divine masculine in the outer realms can come together in co-creation.
Yeah, nicely described. I led a guided meditation last night. It was my turn, and I ran the Divine Mother energy of stem cell transplant. The beauty of stem cell transplant is the latest research around stem cells is that fat cells can be converted into stem cells, which means now that you can literally rebuild your body if you go back to the original pattern, which is, which is really the flower of life. So when you get to go back to the original division of the cells of the in fertilization of the male and the female, you have the division of 2 into 4, and the 4 is not a square, it's actually the tetrahedron. Then you have the flower of life that comes out of that, and that's the pattern that you're talking about. And when we go back to that and actually rebuild our whole DNA structure for the flower of life, we start to heal because we remember who we are. And then when we go back to the flower of life as the basic structure of reality, then the illusionary aspect of the matrix begins to fall apart because it can't stand, it can't be in the way of the truth. Let's maybe describe it that way. So I found that really interesting how powerful it is to understand the basic geometry of creation. And then we align with that, that creation, that geometry is all the way up and all the way down. And in every lifetime and in every universe, known or unknown, that's who we are. And when we align to that, then that soul essence, what you're talking about, we have access to that. We have it access on all the levels of our DNA, even our soul DNA, which is vibrating at another frequency above our 3D or all the way up. So I find what you're saying very inspiring and very exciting. It's very causing very much a synthesis of what I'm coming to in my own reality of understanding this really exciting time, this exciting year that we're about to enter. I mean, call it the year of the dog. Well, sleeping dogs don't lie. All the way up to unicorns and magic, whatever way you want to look at it, this is going to be one interesting year.
Powerful and dynamic, yeah. And what you were saying about the tetrahedron is so very true also, because it isn't that square, it's the tetrahedron, or if you want to look at it from just a 2D perspective, it's the diamond essence of Lemuria, which is our first existence here on this earth, which is the ethereal essence of soul, which is love, light, oneness, and language being telepathic, energetic, soul-to-soul communication, And what's really interesting about what you were saying about the stem cells, to take it back full circle to our moon cycles, for us as divine feminine, and the patriarchal society has really suppressed this in the divine feminine, and for thousands of years, back in the new moon phase, as sages, as shamanic healers, we would go into our teepees, or what's known nowadays as the red tent, and go and bleed into Mother Earth during the new moon, and we would receive visions. And our menstrual blood, even if we're not in, no longer cycling in that sense, and if we're in menopause, we still have that menstrual blood churning within us, on a monthly basis. And so does the divine masculine, because everything comes from divine femininity, from that womb of creation. We're all divine feminine at its essence. And so in the menstrual blood, and it used to be done in sacred ceremony as well, that you would drink the menstrual blood, because what is in menstrual blood? Stem cells.
Yeah,
rejuvenation.
And anatomic gold,
soul
too.
essence. Anatomic gold, right? And so we have turned the menstrual cycle into something that is nasty, and we have to hide it and quick get out the cup or get out the pads or get out whatever. And instead, it's meant to be honored and revered, and we're meant to come back to that sacredness and see it as the soul essence that it is, and utilize it for tuning into source energy. And along with the magic of the unicorn and that spiral, is, if you notice the seashell, the
Yes.
seashell, and that is like that, right? And that's one of the key pieces of my device, actually, because what is that? That's the Fibonacci spiral. That's the flower of life. That's the phi ratio. That's all of the connection of the music of the spheres and the connection of the universe. And when we harness that energy into a specific focus, just like the horn of the unicorn, we can actually be a power and a force to reckon with, because we are the power of love. And was it Jimi Hendrix? I just posted it recently. What was that? What's that saying? I think it was Jimi Hendrix who said it. When the love of the power of love overcomes the love of power, then we'll know peace.
Yeah, it sounds good to me. Yeah, I'll have some of that, please.
Aye, same here.
Yeah, it's interesting because the whole basis of monatomic gold and higher levels of consciousness comes from, the menstrual blood. And, it was, the whole desire in Egypt was to manufacture that, like the bread of life, so that it could be eaten as manna, right? So we could have this higher consciousness. The difficulty with that is if your vibrational frequency isn't ready for it, you'll literally go over the edge into craziness, right? Because your body can't handle that higher frequency. So all of you people out there who want to try monatomic gold, it's a shortcut. Beware, it can lead to some pretty scary stuff. So best to do it in the natural evolutionary steps of raising your vibration to match that, so you're manufacturing inside of yourself rather than ingesting it from the outside in. Anyway, that's a little aside for those that see the world that way.
One of the things I'd add to that is, and this is something that I teach in my soul mediumship course, from the earthly perspective, we have this thing of higher and lower. In soul essence, there is no higher or lower. So you're not really raising your frequency. Okay, you're not raising or lowering your frequency. We use those terms to make sense of it here on this earth, but really, if you look at multidimensional consciousness and who we are as a soul, it's like band frequencies on a radio, or what are we on right now? Internet bandwidth. So what you're doing is you are, and again, going back to Tesla's quote, it's his most famous quote for a reason. Think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency. If you tune into that specific vibration and frequency of the monatomic gold, if you're meditating, if you are doing things that bring you into that vibrational frequency, you're tuning the radio dial. Okay, and when you tune into that radio dial of the channel of love, of source, of that infinite consciousness, then you're able to handle that light energy. Because I agree with you, if you take in something in your body, and this was actually asked on my course, somebody asked me, well, because if you look at the movie The Matrix, the film, the trilogy, at the end of it, for those of you who haven't seen it, I'm not really giving any spoilers away, but at the end of the film, there's this whole bang, basically. It's just kind of like the Big Bang Theory in a sense, and everyone becomes enlightened. And so the question was actually asked of me on my course, well, isn't that what's supposed to happen with humanity? And I said, no, not exactly. And here's why. Because if that were to happen right now, our bodies would overload. We would not be able to handle it. The masses on this planet are not in the vibrational frequency. And so if that amount of light energy were to come into their beings right now, they would literally explode.
Yeah, they'd be spontaneous combustion would be happening, right?
Exactly. So it has to happen in a set of waves, for lack of a better word. All of humanity is not going to become enlightened or awakened overnight. It's going to happen in waves.
Yeah, I think the important thing to remember about, higher or lower is we want to get into duality consciousness and put a morality on that, or a judgment. Like you say, it's amplitude, it's frequency, it's vibrational, it's up the scale or down the scale, but it doesn't mean what one's greater or better or lesser than the other. So it's the thing that we really get it caught into this duality of yin and yang, that somehow we want to put that into some sort of morality of what's good and what's bad. And it's got nothing to do with that whatsoever. It just is, right? There's no morality around this.
Exactly.
It's frequency, right? And
exactly.
even when we
exactly.
say we're letting go what no longer serves us, or non-beneficial energies, it's not saying that we that those, even those energies are good or bad. We're just saying, for me, in my situation, they're not beneficial. We're not making a judgment on
Right.
the energies at all. It's just, for me, they're not the best, the best for me in this moment.
Right,
So,
it's not the best for my soul and my soul's path and progression, yeah?
yeah,
I mean, it's very similar to, going into the whole negativity of this earth, of wars, of Trump, as you mentioned, of, the elites, that's very prominent here in this culture, here in this country. But it's very interesting because when you hit the borders of Scotland, it's like you can breathe again. And you don't have that type of energy that you do, more down south in England. It's not to say that it's bad or good. It's just a different
different.
frequency.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's all it is. And it's very interesting to watch that, how people will, in duality, say, oh, Trump is this, or the Queen is this, or the elite is this, or what have you. They're people too. They're a vibrational frequency too. You can label it, and some people say they don't have any souls and whatnot. That's not the case at all. From the soul frequency, they're just playing a role. And so it depends on the vibrational frequency that you're in. So like you said, when you're letting go of those energies, I don't place my, energy into the elites or, Illuminati or, any of that stuff, because that's not the vibrational frequency I resonate in. It's not to say that somebody else who does is bad. It's just that that's not what's beneficial for my soul and its path and its progression. I'm here to be in service. And as you shift in frequency in your consciousness, you come to realize that the bad guy is not the bad guy at all. Trump is not the bad guy. It's the part of our consciousness that we as a collective have agreed to that is meant to shift.
yeah. And everything shows up for a reason, which is really not the question why, but how. It's really, how are you going to deal with that? All this is going to show up in our face no matter what. But what we have is a choice of how we want to react to it. Do we want to play the victim, or do we want to say it, the Illuminati, or this or that, or whatever? Or do we want to just say, that's interesting? And you can even go as far as to say, well, that's not in my world. In other words, that's that world over there, but that's not relevant to my world. What I'm saying is, in the smorgasbord of energies and vibrations and frequencies, guess what? You get to pick. So choose wisely.
Right. And that's what's meant by you create your own reality.
Yeah.
It's not in this, it's not in the sense of, you create your own reality where Trump's no longer there. No, Trump is still going to be there. He's a part of this dimension. You can go shift into 11D or multidimensional consciousness. Trump's still going to be there. It's like you said, it's how you deal with it, how you choose. I mean, I was put into a position, I'm not going to give any details of what happened to me, but I was put into a very precarious, dangerous situation 4 years ago, which precipitated my death, actually, the anniversary of my death coming up here in 2 days on Valentine's Day. It was what led to those events. And I was literally in that position 4 years ago, forced to be faced with something that I did not have a choice. And the only choice that I did have, the paradigm that was presented to me was what it was. I couldn't get out of that situation. And so what was presented to me was, how was I going to deal with that? It's like a hurricane that comes at you. You can't stop the hurricane. It's going to come. Dorothy, we're not in Kansas anymore.
Well,
But it's how you deal with that hurricane. Yeah.
absolutely. The other phenomena that I'm finding is, the more that you do this, work on it, well, maybe the word isn't test, but it seems like tests from the human perspective seem to get more intense. It's sort of like the universe has a sense of humor. It says, okay, you handled that one pretty good. You didn't freak out, and you didn't go into a mass of bubbling idiocy on the floor, sucking your thumb in the fetal position. Let's try you with this one, right? So, so Yeah,
I talk about this actually as part of my course, and I did a video on YouTube and Facebook about this, having to do with timelines and timeline loops. And this is something that's also part of this year, since you asked about the year of the unicorn. For those who have not made the shifts, they may seem like they're in a Groundhog Day scenario. I just did a mentoring session for a woman in America who came to me with that. She's like, I feel like I'm in a Groundhog Day. You know, what's going on? And this is what happens. We get into these timeline loops and we actually feel like the universe is testing us. It's actually not. What that really is that you're having the Groundhog Day scenario so that you can choose differently.
right. And aren't we?
And if you don't choose differently,
it'll show up again.
I was going to say, and exactly, it's going to show up again and again until you choose differently. And then what you think is that universal test is actually the residual energy, going back again to Tesla's quote, vibration, frequency, and energy, right?
Yeah.
You want to know the secrets of the universe. That test is not actually the universe saying, I'm going to test you to see if you can handle this. No, it's residual energy from that old timeline when you have chosen differently. And I know because this happened to me a couple of years ago when I first set out to actually come here and live here and be here. When I first got here, or even actually before I landed here, I started receiving tests from the universe. And I was like, right, is this the universe's idea of a sick joke? You know, what's going on here? And I had to realize that it was the residual energy from that old timeline that I had stepped out of that was still reverberating. And it was the means by which the universe was saying, right, are you going to go back to that old timeline loop, or are you going to stay the course on your new timeline?
Right.
And once I said to the universe, I'm on this new timeline, all those other residual energies became low.
But if I'm understanding correctly, and hopefully people can hear me, that when you're saying when those timelines cross over, you have a choice, you know, that to either dissolve the unfulfilled or unresolved aspects of that timeline with your divine love or your energy of compassion, or go back to that timeline and repeat it again as another endless loop. And so it seems like it's a test, but by the universe, but actually is you clearing up your own timeline so that you can be totally present in the here and now, in the physical reality of your body right now. Is that what you're saying?
You are attempting to afford Source's vision. So when you make the choice to move out of that timeline, you are actually choosing to be in alignment with Source and your soul astrology, if you will, and then those residual energies will fade.
Right. So it was great having this opportunity to talk with you. We should do it more often. We got lots to share. So how do people get hold of you?
Check me out on my websites, diamondlady.net and soulsongsatsangoftheheart.net. All my lists of courses and ways to get in touch with me for sessions and everything else is available on there.
All right. So we're going to say bye for now, and we'll call this a wrap. So thank you for being on the show. It's great. We'll have you back. Lots to talk about.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah. The year of the unicorn, a time of change and transformation, not only for you, but for the planet. So buckle your safety belts. We're in for it. All right. Bye for now.
And enjoy the ride.
And enjoy the ride.
For quality online wellness products, courses, and services, visit our sponsors, thewellnessstore.ca and the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy located at thewellnessacademy.ca. To stay in touch, visit us at thewellnessshow.ca. And until next time, be healthy, wealthy, and wise.
The Wellness Show, episode 185.